to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Our continued coverage of all this past weekend's action across the boxing sphere as Mi Re Shin of South Korea racked up another win and a highlight reel knockout off a flush right hand, a heavy right hand that landed right on the button for Anna Maria Lozano, absorbed the shot, goes down, ref starts counting. She can't beat the count. She's out of sorts. And that's another win for Mi Re Shin as she inches closer and closer to world title contention. In fairness, Anna Maria Lozano is hardly the best and brightest that the super featherweight division has to offer. This was just a keep busy fight for Mi Re Shin. Somebody to pounce on, somebody to beat on, to keep the machine well oiled, keep the tools sharp. I'm not surprised she knocked her out. I said she would. So another recorded win in the banks for Mi Re Shin, who now sports a professional record of 17 wins with 2 losses, 3 draws, 10 knockouts, having never been knocked out. It says 16 wins and 9 knockouts. That's because BoxRec is a bit slow to the punch. They haven't updated this fighter's resume yet. They still have it registered as a contest that has yet to take place. This was Mi Re Shin's first fight of this year and her second fight since having lost a split decision to Delphine Persoon in May of last year, where she fought 3 times. She's only fought once this one, but there's still time to get her back out there. Mi Re Shin, who's ranked at number 4 with the WBA, number 4 with the WBC, number 5 with the WBO, and number 2 with the IBF. She's ranked in the top 5 of all 4 alphabet organizations, very close to becoming the mandatory challenger by way of at least one of them, the IBF most of all. The only person ranked ahead of Mi Re Shin is Delphine Persoon, who's already en route to fight Alicia Baumgartner. So you figure that if Delphine loses that fight, Mi Re Shin will advance to the number 1 spot via the IBF's ranked standings and be in a pole position to become Alicia's next mandatory challenger, or at minimum, one of them, since she still has all 4 alphabet titles. The question is, do they crown her the mandatory challenger straight away, or will the IBF order a final eliminator between Mi Re Shin and, say, Rima Ayadi, who's ranked at number 3, or Christina Lenardatu, who's ranked at number 4, Nazifo Bell, who's ranked at number 5? What are they going to do? Are they going to just crown her the mandatory straight away, or will they order a final eliminator between her and somebody in their ranked standings? And if they do, will that somebody actually decide to take the fight? Mi Re Shin is this era's Delphine Persoon. She exhibits all the qualities and characteristics, the volume, the aggression, the power, the mean spirit that Delphine Persoon used to exhibit when she was a younger woman. It would seem that Mi Re Shin is her successor, even though she lost a narrow decision to her. She's the heir apparent to become this division's most fearsome volume puncher, fearsome pressure fighter. Now, those finesse fighters, movers, and jabbers, they won't fare well against a fighter like Mi Re Shin. So how will Alicia Baumgartner fare against Mi Re Shin? Well, we have to see how she fares against Delphine first. And if she makes it through that, and she stays at this weight, she stays in this division, Mi Re Shin is going to be her problem. That's the gist of it. Beyond the Delphine Persoon fight, if Alicia wins, I don't know what her future plans are. Is she going to continue to reign as the super featherweight division's undisputed champion, or will she decide to move up? Will she stay at Matchroom? You figure that if she decides to stay at Matchroom and decides to move up in weight to, say, lightweight, Matchroom will have 1 or 2 options for her. The winner of Dixon versus Harper for the WBO title, IBF champion Beatriz Ferreira, she's up there too, she's one of their fighters. That's if she stays with Matchroom. If she decides to move up. Now, if she decides not to, she stays at 130. Sooner or later, she's going to have to fight Mi Re Shin. Or she doesn't stay at 130, she decides to move up, but she decides not to stay with Matchroom. I don't know if she's going to have access to those fighters, those aforementioned champions. We'll see what happens. In men's welterweight news, the ongoing fallout of the Boots Ennis versus Norman Jr.'s collapse, the collapse of that fight that is now dead in the water, according to Eddy Hearn, reactions continue to pour in. A Twitter user that goes by the name Malik Span said, "Actually, the money for Norman is an investment in boots." The $2.2 million that the Norman team was looking for. This is the cost to make Boots a star. If you believe that Boots has the potential to be a pound-for-pound great, then major fights and profits will come. Oh, so you're proposing that they overspend, overpay. Eddy and DAZN have done worse financially. Meeting Norman halfway at $2 million, and he's giving up every concession, is fair. Fair to who? If you believe Boots is that guy. Showtime only made a profit on 2 of 6 Mayweather fights, Canelo and Manny. So you are proposing that they overpay, even though they're already overpaying for an undercard fighter they were going to. You are proposing that they overspend. All to satisfy the inflated financial demands of what can only be described as an undercard fighter, since his next fight is on an undercard with no regard for escalation. That if you cave, if you give in to these kinds of demands, everybody's gonna make them. Everybody's already making them, and if you cave, they will continue to make them on the premise that you already bulked. You gave in to the Normans, you'll give in to us. Now, other fighters have employed similar logic to what the Normans are doing. Other fighters that are cautionary tales now about overplaying your hand. Rolly Romero was offered a main event slot opposite the ring Ryan Garcia that would have got him more money than what he took, what he accepted. An undercard slot against Isaac Cruz where he lost the fight, lost his belt. Made less money. Playing hardball. What did he get out of it? Not a lot. Less than he would have got fighting Ryan, like Brian Norman is about to get less than what he could have got fighting Boots. Oh, granted that he probably stands a better chance, a way better chance of beating Derek Cuevas than he stood of beating Boots. But doesn't that then mean that the only real benefit of turning this offer down is you don't have to fight Boots? Because you're not getting more money. You're not going to get more money for Cuevas than you would have got fighting Boots. That's not the virtue. It's not money. It's self-preservation on the premise that you can always come back to negotiate. You can always come back to the negotiation table provided you don't lose what iota of leverage you have, which is that belt. But who says you won't lose that belt? Who says you don't lose it? Who says you can come back? So maybe you don't lose it to Derek Cuevas. You could lose it to somebody else after that. Making less than what you would have made fighting Boots. And if you lose it making less than you would have made fighting Boots, what's the moral of the story then? What's your leverage? Somebody else's ambition? Somebody else's money, since you don't have any of your own? Malik Span's logic seems to be that Matchroom should be willing to make these sacrifices to get Boots to the next level. Oddly enough, he doesn't make that recommendation when it comes to Brian or when it comes to Top Rank. The logic is too lopsided, linear. So you don't think Top Rank should make sacrifices to get Brian to the next level? Or is it that you know he won't get to the next level because he's not that good? Is Top Rank's commitment to Brian Norman not equal to Matchroom's commitment to Jaron Ennis? Because Top Rank didn't even try to pay for this fight. Nothing you want to say about that? So when you're saying that Eddie Hearn should overpay Brian to get Boots the Brian Norman fight, are you also telling Top Rank to overpay Eimantas Stanionis or Mario Barrios to get Brian that fight? Those fights. No, you're not. You're not, because you know they're not going to, and you know that Brian Norman is not the kind of fighter you break the bank for, but you're expecting Matchroom to break the bank for him for no other reason than Boots' ambition to become undisputed and Matchroom's investment in him. Someone else's ambition and someone else's money. These are your bargaining chips? It's pretty fucking pathetic. Sad. How little today's postmodern boxer believes in themselves and their boxing and their ability that these are viewed as bargaining chips. Because Boots wants to be undisputed, and I guess you don't. Is that it? Is that all? This is your bargaining strategy, your bartering process to use somebody else's ambition and someone else's commitment against them? Well, it didn't seem to work out. You didn't get what you wanted, and you're back to fighting on undercards. So I came across several videos of Teofimo Lopez working alongside Canelo Alvarez and Eddy Reynoso. To what extent, I don't know, but it does all tie together. I don't know if he's going to have Eddy in his corner in his next fight. I don't know if they've reached some kind of arrangement, but many are interpreting this as the necessary changes that Teofimo has needed. What's this have to do with Brian Norman? We'll get to that. Veteran boxing scribe Sean Zattel reacted to these videos by saying, "I've said on my lives for a few years that Teofimo should link up with Reynoso. Canelo style talents would gel well under Reynoso. Head movement and explosiveness, 2 of Canelo's trademarks. Teofimo has 2. Reynoso can give adjustments without taking away from his best attributes. I've said that myself several times here on the channel in many, many lives, that his corner situation needs to change because he's not getting better. Sean Zettel seems to be of a similar mindset, that Teofimo, to get to the next level, to improve, he needs a different corner. His father is not going to be enough, not moving forward and not at welterweight against welterweights. He thinks he should train under Eddy Reynoso. I agree. I think stylistically they would gel well. So where the Brian Norman situation ties into this situation is that it's conceivable that the people at Top Rank will revisit talks for a Teofimo Lopez versus Brian Norman fight. Initially, they wanted to do that fight late next month, but Teofimo balked. They wanted to do it in New York. He wanted it to go down in LA. He used that as an excuse to not do the fight. And they can't make him. They can't force him to take that fight. So it's conceivable that Teofimo may sit out what remains of this year, where Brian Norman will be returning on the undercard of Keyshawn Davis versus Gustavo Lemos. If this represents some kind of an arrangement between Teofimo Lopez and Team Canelo, Eddy Reynoso, he can use this time, he can use what remains of this year to improve upon what he's already good at with Eddy Reynoso in his corner, presumably, if that's what this is. I don't know if that's what this is. But I do think if that's what this is, it would better his chances, improve upon them, because I didn't like Teofimo's chances at welterweight based on how he has been looking. He needs to add to his repertoire. He needs more tutelage than his father can provide him. Prepare him. The subject of Lopez versus Norman Jr. has already been broached before here on this channel, and I did not like Teofimo's chances in that fight. Based on how he looked with Steve Claggett at 140, who was getting all in his wheelhouse at 147, Brian Norman might have proved to be too big, too strong. You couldn't knock out Steve Claggett. What are you going to do with Brian? The question I ask myself now, if he's making changes to his corner, if he's adding things and adding to his own repertoire, then he stands a better chance. The situation as it was, I would have went with Brian to beat him. The situation as it is, or what it might be, with the help of Eddy, he can win. Teofimo Lopez would be small for welterweight, kind of like how Canelo Alvarez is small for super middle. Most, if not all, of Canelo Alvarez's opponents tower over him, whether it's Callum Smith or Billy Joe or Caleb Plant, Jaime, Edgar. I mean, Canelo Alvarez is at a height disadvantage and a reach disadvantage almost all the time, if not all the time at super middle, and somehow he's still able to win. Teofimo needs some of that to rub off on him because he's in a similar predicament. As a welterweight, he'll be at a height disadvantage in most situations, a reach disadvantage in most situations. And we already know that he's not the same fighter on the back foot as he is on the front foot. It's on the front foot where he needs to improve. Canelo Alvarez is quite effective on the front foot, behind the high guard, catching and shooting, drawing his opponent's lead to counter them in between. That's what Teofimo's missing. That's what Teofimo needs. So if what this is a preemptive attack of sorts, preparation for a Brian Norman fight, not this year, but the next one, this betters his chances. It does. Teofimo Lopez is not done at Top Rank, even if he would like to be. He's still under contract, and it's my impression that he still owes them a fight or fights, at least one. So as long as that's the situation, the door is always open for a Brian Norman Jr. fight, as Teofimo doesn't even look to be unifying his own division, the 140-pound division, where he still holds the WBO title. His next destination seems to be welterweight, and at welterweight, Top Rank doesn't have a whole lot going on. They don't have a whole lot of options for either Brian Norman or Teofimo, aside from each other. So it's conceivable that at some point next year, they will revisit that fight, and this time, perhaps with the help of Eddy Reynoso in his corner, Teofimo might take it. Questions that need answers. Brian Norman and his team would not accept a fight with Jaron Ennis for anything less than $2.2 million. What you have to ask yourself is Top Rank going to give him that? Would they give him that for a Teofimo Lopez fight? As Teofimo, he's got demands of his own, an inflated ego, an inflated sense of self. of his own. What is Teofimo going to want for the fight? What is Brian going to want for the fight?
They may be willing to accept less.
The Normans, Team Norman, may be willing to accept less money for Teofimo because it wouldn't require them to cross the street. It wouldn't require them to fight under somebody else's banner in somebody else's city. It would be against Teofimo and not Jaron Ennis. They might like their chances against Teofimo more than they like their chances against Jaron Ennis. So they might be willing to accept less for Teofimo than what they wanted for Jaron Ennis.
So if they do,
you just fumbled the bag. If you accept less for Teofimo than you would have got with Jaron Ennis and you lose anyway,
you're hustling backwards.
it's the Rolly thing. It's the Rolly thing all over again. Rolly Romero rejected a main event slot with Ryan to fight on an undercard with Isaac because maybe he thought to himself, I stand a better chance against Isaac than I do against Ryan. I stand a better chance on my own side of the street than somebody else's. That backfired, and so could this.
If Brian loses anyway, if he loses to Teofimo for less than he would have got with Jaron Ennis.
With Eddy Reynoso in his corner, Teofimo can add what's been missing because he's not the same fighter on the front foot that he is on the back foot. On the back foot, he's a very effective boxer puncher, counter puncher, waiting for his opponent to throw so he can counter what they throw. But if he has to give chase, and if he has to pursue them, that's where the holes are. That's when and where he's vulnerable, often trying for punches before he's in position to land them. Leaping, lunging, and missing because he's trying for punches before he's in position to land them. And at welterweight, that could be amplified because he's going to be on the smallest side of the spectrum. He's not going to have the advantages he had as a lightweight.
He was big as a lightweight, not so big as a super lightweight, and definitely not so big as a welter.
Changes need to be made. Changes, additions, whatever you want to call it. And the added peace of mind he would have going into this fight if he did have Eddy in his corner, that he's got one of the best trainers in the world in his corner, and at minimum, he's done everything he could do to improve, to prepare.
That added peace of mind.
That can add confidence to a fighter. Give him that kick in the ass they need and that fighting spirit. Once again, I don't know if that's what the situation is. I don't know if Teofimo has reached an arrangement with Eddy Reynoso for his next fight. I don't know that for sure.
But it wouldn't be a bad idea.
Sharpen up on a few things. Because Brian is bigger, taller, longer, and perhaps stronger than Teofimo, I expect Brian to try to bulldoze him like he bulldozed Giovanni Santillan, with the difference being Giovanni likes to come forward. He got beat at his own game because he likes to come forward, fight in the pocket, where Teofimo likes to hang back, set up counters.
He's a counter puncher.
Stylistically, he has the right style for this fight. It's whether or not physically he can handle this assignment. Or will Brian be too big and too strong? We just don't know. But I get the sense that they're going to revisit this fight
at some point next year, and that's what Teofimo is getting ready for.